Hello, my name is Alex from the Advent Label Applicator. This is going to be a demonstration video for these. I believe we have 4 different types of containers that we're putting these water conditioner labels on that you've printed yourself. And we have a couple issues I just want to point out. It's not going to be the most straightforward video. Some of the labels we only received 3 samples, actually 4. We used one just to test. And ideally, when you have a stack of labels in the machine, you want to have at least 10 labels because you're going to make your fine adjustments. Also, some of these labels weren't cut very straight. I tried to trim them up as best you can, but the accuracy of the machine is going to be based on how true these labels are, because we're using guides to guide the label onto the container. So if there's any type of spacing or they're inconsistent, then the guides can't work as well as they can. So you can see here I trimmed them as best I could. They're pretty square. So generally you put your stack in here. We have our guides. They can be moved left and right, but usually you want to label or have the labels in the center line of the machine. And the center line is this middle label feed tire with the plastic sleeve behind it. We've already adjusted it for this container, so I'm just going to go ahead and start labeling it. We'll do the adjustments on the other containers. But you simply insert, and that's part of the problem, is we did have a very, very small stack. So let me just go grab these. Make sure they're fanned forward, make sure it's moving, and then we'll reset. There we go. So you insert a container and it feeds a single label on. There we go. Pretty good. Let's go ahead and just label some more and see how it comes out. And generally with this type of container you'll average about 24 containers per minute fairly comfortably. It's just 2 hands. Guide it to the rollers, it will take it out of your hands. And then you can see a label goes on in about less than a second, and just take it out. We have a standard overhead pressure arm that's applying pressure to this unfilled container, so that allows it to pull that label on without any skipping. You can see it goes on very nicely, nice and tight. Looks really good. Okay, so let me go ahead and do a changeover. So we only have 2 labels of this container. So I'm going to try, it might not pull those 2 labels especially well, but again, in my center line, it doesn't have to be exact, but you can see I'm moving my guides in. You can see that's moving. Just going to side it to where I think it needs to go. We can adjust these rollers, but just to make the video not long, what I'm going to go ahead and do is adjust for the carriage. So this allows you to adjust for different diameter containers. You can go from 1 to 12 inches just by turning this carriage knob. Then I'm going to adjust the overhead pressure arm. You can slide it left and right. Just put it in the center line. A little bit of a gap on the stop. And what that does is that prevents you from having to lift this up each and every time. So you just insert and it just pulls it into there. Okay. Let me go ahead and restack those labels. If you leave them there too long, they begin to curl, especially printed label stock. Let me open up those guides because we only have 2 labels there. Okay, so I'm going to turn it on, insert, and you can see that one label goes on very easily. Pretty straightforward. You can see I'm a little bit on the low side, so if I needed to make an adjustment, see here, I would just move my guides. So I want to move it down. Okay, and we only have 1 label, so let me just get that started by hand. Let me see if I could get that. And it's not going to grab. So what I might do is put some spacers here. Let's see if we can get that one label to go on. There we go. Insert. And there we go. Just like that. So we're going to pause the video. We have some phone calls that we got to grab, and then we'll come right on back and do the rest. Okay, so we have 3 more containers to go. I made the adjustment to this medium-sized container. I've already set my guides here. And made my adjustment to the carriage knob and my overhead pressure arm and move my guides. We're just going to go ahead and label these up. See here? Those are really perfect. So let's go ahead and get these other 3. Now you'll see a little bit of a label pre-feed. You might, for shorter labels, you could adjust your pre-feed timer anywhere from 0 up to 10. Usually most labels are going to be a setting of 5, but for these shorter labels we might have to drop down to 3. What you're trying to avoid is any pre-feeding of the label. And that's perfect. So that's a setting of 4. Again, those labels are going on really nicely, and if you can get them to be trimmed up, even the squarer they are, the more perfect it will be. So you can see it does a really nice job. And we have our final label. Let's see if we can get that one on. It's our last label, so we don't have any labels underneath that. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip that. And we'll do our adjustment to our 3rd container. So again, as we get closer and closer to 1 inch, your adjustments have to be a little bit finer. So again, what we're looking for is the adjusting so the container is sitting on both sets of rollers, the stainless steel collars and the front white tires, hitting the trigger where you can hear a clicking sound, and not touching this brass finger bar. This is where the labels are deflected up to the container. You can see we need to have the overhead pressure arm there. Usually I like to have a label in the carriage, but I'm just going to do it by sight because I don't want the labels to curl up. Okay. Set my gun. Another advanced adjustment is you can move those stainless steel collars and those white tires. They have a set screw and they can be moved left and right. Let me ahead and quickly demonstrate that on the stainless steel collars, just so I can show you the clearance. And that allows you to move your guides a little bit closer to the container. You could drop them down and get a better angle to give your fingers a little bit more clearance. You can see here there's a flat that we machine onto all these stainless steel shafts. And that just allows these guides to drop down a little bit further. So you can see there, now they're a little bit closer to the shaft. And that just gives our fingers a little bit more clearance. And you can always test your work just by turning it on, just inserting, and seeing how well it moves. You can see it's moving nice and smoothly, and that's what we're looking for. Okay. So I'm going to grab my stack of labels. Okay. A little bit tight. There we go. Alright. I think a setting of 3 might be a little bit better. See there? I just adjusted it. Go ahead and insert. There we go. Pretty good. I also noticed that you're using a 100-pound label stock. I think on these smaller diameter containers you might be better off with a 80-pound stock because the grain of the paper wants to lift up the label because it's being wrapped around there nice and tight. So just something, I think 80-pound will work a little bit better. You can see it's a little bit on the high side, so we can certainly adjust it. So I'm going to move the container up a little bit. Move my guide. Pretty good. Now these black feed tires, there could be interference, and we have that taken care of too by, let me take these labels out. We have a set screw on the black feed tires. Take those out. We only have 2 labels left, so let me see if I could get this adjusted so we could just get at least one more label on. Has a set screw. We're just simply going to move that out of the way. Generally, for most smaller labels, you only need the single feed tire behind this plastic sleeve. That's what creates the pinch point and allows that label to be fed through. The wider, using the other two label feed tires help with wider labels, especially towards the edges. On certain paper stocks, they help quite a bit. Let's see if I can get that started. Okay. Very good. Turn it on. There we go. So we moved it down. Really straightforward. You know, ideally we would have more labels to work with, but looks good. So I'm not going to try to get that last label on, especially on a really small label like this. I'm just going to grab that. And then we'll do our final label. And this is the trickiest one, just because it's right at 1 inch. And it just requires, you can hear it's still clicking, so that's good. And ideally, because it's a very small diameter, just need to toggle it. Sometimes it's not in the cards to get those set screws. There we go. Alright. So once you get those set, oops, and get the right size here. Of course, the machine comes with the Allen wrench tool. Do make sure that you tighten those up back on the shaft. If you don't, leave the set screw out too far, you can stop the glue roller. It might hit the glue roller. So you always want to make sure that that's nice and tight, again, up against that shaft. You can see there, that allows me to drop it down really close to the shaft. And same thing with that one. And you can see the pressure or the weight of the trigger will pop it up, so you really need to use the overhead pressure arm or get that into play to do your final adjustments. A little bit of a gap. The smaller the gap, the easier it is to get the container to go in there. We can check our work. You can see it's very tight. A little bit on the close side to that cover. But it looks good. It's not jumping. It's nice and smooth. Okay. So now we just need to get our again, we only have 3 labels here. Not the ideal situation, but let's get that. Well, let me turn it off. Let me get the container in there so we can see where it goes. Okay. That should be it. Okay. And it's hard to tell. I think that's going to be pretty good. I might be a little bit on the... Move it down just a little bit. Trying to work fast. Okay. So insert. There we go. Now these labels are a little bit oversized. You can see that that's actually white paper going right to the edge. And you can see it's going right to the bottom. Ideally, you'll either have an overlap where it's 1/8 of an inch, or you'll give yourself some space. I would probably recommend an overlap. And again, I think an 80-pound stock would work better. Let me go ahead and quickly get another label on here, just so we can see. There we go. And that's a really difficult container, but you can see it's fairly straightforward. Just fine-tune your labels a little bit, and it should be a really straightforward application. And you can see we did a changeover of 5 containers here. We did all those 3 sizes, these 2 right here, and then we did this 1-inch, very, very small, and usually a very difficult container, and it was pretty straightforward. So that's the Advent 200. Other things I should point out, it does use hot melt glue. You turn on the heater in the morning, and it takes about 90 minutes for it to warm up. Once the rollers turn nice and smoothly, then you can go ahead and operate the machine. Maintenance is fairly straightforward. It's just keeping the rollers nice and clean and keeping the shafts. There's 3 oiling points on each side. And the label feed tires, you want to keep those nice and clean with alcohol. And that's usually about what you need to do. The key part is keeping the machine as clean as possible. If there's any questions, we could reach at 800-846-7716. Thank you.